breaking, new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's August 14th here in Seoul. I'm AnJunggeun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Seong.
Happy Monday, Ian.
And Jessica Dainong.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. Tomorrow is Gwangbokjeol, in English, that's National Liberation Day in Korea. 78 years ago, on August 15th, Korea became independent from colonial Japan's rule. And Seong, why don't you first explain to us what this day is and what it means to us Koreans here in the country?
Of course, 78 years ago on this day, August 15th, 1945, Korea was liberated from Japanese colonial rule, marking the end of 35 years of occupation. The Korean people's struggle for independence, resilience, and unwavering spirit paved the way for this momentous day. It's a time for reflection and celebration as the nation honors the sacrifices made by those who fought for their freedom. During the colonial period, Koreans faced oppression and suppression of their culture, language, and identity. The fight for independence was a collective effort that included protests, demonstrations, and sacrifices by countless individuals. National Liberation Day is a reminder of the strength and unity displayed by Koreans in their pursuit of self-determination.
And like many other countries, these national holidays mean a lot for youth out there. Could you explain to us what National Liberation Day here in Korea means to us millennials and Gen Z?
I think as Seong mentioned, we have this history of Japanese colonization and the freedom fighters, who sacrificed and had this indomitable spirit to secure the freedom and the peace that we so freely enjoy today. So as a young generation, I think it's very significant because it's not just a date on a calendar for us to remind that this happened, but it's more of a reminder for us to make that kind of commitment to sort of carry this legacy and to make sure that we preserve and protect the freedom and the peace that our ancestors have fought so hard to give it to us on this day.
And in order to carry that legacy, I think it's really important to spend Gwangbokjeol very well. And in light of Gwangbokjeol, we would like to introduce a few places you can go visit if you're in Korea. And Seong, why don't you introduce the first location for us?
You know what, Ian and Jessica, especially Gwangbokjeol, Korea National Liberation Day is a close one to me at heart because my great-grandfather was actually one of the independence activists who had been in prison as well under the Japanese colonial rule. So he suffered a lot from his trauma and experience from torture and everything.
Oh my goodness.
And every 15th of August, I do get a reminder of the sacrifices our ancestor had to make for us to live in a free democratic society. And I had the pleasure of visiting the SeodaemunPrison History Hall, located in Seoul, South Korea. And let's have a look at the screen to see what it looks like. The SeodaemunPrison History Hall is a museum and former prison in Seo district of Seoul, South Korea. It was constructed in 1908 and imprisoned roughly 40,000 Korean independence activists during the Japanese occupation era. Some 900 of them had died here. As you walk through the corridors of the SeodaemunPrison History Hall, you'll be immersed in a visceral experience that brings history to life. Exhibits showcase the conditions endured by prisoners, from cramped cells to torture rooms, giving visitors a first-hand understanding of the horrors faced by those who stood up against oppression. Cell conditions were very poor, with no heating or cooling system. Inmates didn't even have a toilet, so instead they had to use a bucket. Some were trapped in a so-called dark room with no windows that ridded them of light 24 hours a day. Over the years, SeodaemunPrison witnessed the incarceration of numerous activists, intellectuals, and patriots. Among its most notable prisoners were An Sang-ho as well as Yu Gwan-sun, a young woman who courageously led the March 1st movement in 1919, a seminal event in Korea's fight for freedom. The History Hall also pays tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, highlighting the stories of individuals who defied adversity and injustice. through multimedia installations, archival documents, and personal accounts, the sacrifices made in the name of freedom are etched into the collective memory of Korea. Seodaemun Prison History Hall stands as a powerful testament to the indomitable will of people who refuse to bow to tyranny. So as you can see, I had the pleasure of visiting Seodaemun Prison History Hall with you as well, Yeon, and you could really feel the breath of history, the really breathing on you, and on the walls exactly same, preserved from the ages of era of Japanese colonial rule.
Right, it was a pleasure to go there because you could really see what our independence heroes fought for and what they had to go through. Many of them were killed in these very poor condition operated halls and prisons. And what I also thought was quite interesting was when I went there, a lot of elementary school students and middle school students came in light of Gwangbokjeol. And I thought that was a really good thing because, you know, at the end of the day, you need to remember history, and in order for you to do that, you should be doing that at these education facilities.
And a piece of trivia, you are also one of those children who volunteered as a guide, you said.
I actually wasn't going to say that, but I actually was. I had the pleasure back in middle school to take a lot of foreign tourists around different historic places, and that included the Seodaemun prison.
A true patriot from a young age.
Very much so.
But that's the thing. I think you need to always remember history and keep studying it in order for us to not take what we have right now for granted. And Xiong took us to where Korea's independence movement activists served time or died. But now I'd like to introduce you guys to one of Korea's most revered freedom fighters. He's the one who was assassinated the first Japanese resident general to Korea. I'll give you a bit more history on who he is by taking you to a museum built in his honor of his contributions. Take a look at the screen. Now, this is the AnJunggeun Memorial Museum located in the Chunggu district of Seoul. It's actually within walking distance from Seoul Tower, and it contains records and exhibition halls showcasing the timeline of the patriot from his birth to death, and the museum aims to remind people of An's love for the country. Born in 1879, An grew up during a rocky period of Korea's history. He lived during a time Japan tried to expand its colonial rule over to Korea, and his handprint is symbolic to what he sacrificed for the country. Along with 11 other independence activists, An cut off his left ring finger and in blood wrote Korean independence on the national flag, pledging to devote the rest of his life to the country's independence. His most renowned act of bravery was assassinating a prominent Japanese statesman, Ito Hirobumi. Now, Ito Hirobumi was one of the key figures in Japan trying to expand the country's colonial rule. As part of his plan to bring so-called peace in East Asia, he thought annexing countries like Korea was critical, and AnJunggeun was concerned that Ito's foreign policy had already killed and could kill many more Koreans and lead to a massive war in East Asia. And so once he heard that this Japanese official would arrive at Harbin Station on October 26 of 1909, without hesitation, he went to the station and shot Ito 3 times, killing him. And consequently, AnJunggeun was found guilty of murder by a Japanese court, then executed on March 26, 1910. And unfortunately, he couldn't stop Japan's annexation of Korea, but he did pave a way for many other brave, courageous patriots to resist Japan's oppression. And I had the pleasure, again with Xiong, to go to this AnJunggeun Memorial Museum, and I learned so much because I don't know if you guys saw the movie Hero. It's a musical movie about this patriot, and I was like, this is a very good movie, but to see the actual relics and the timeline from his birth to death, it really made me understand more on what he'd been through and the sacrifices he made.
And I think, you know, now we talk about the heroic acts of what he's done, but if we just take a step back and think about the age and the circumstance that he's in, I mean, just to put your life out there for the country and for the life that he may not even be able to live, like that's a sacrifice that is...
True sacrifice.
That's just beyond imaginable, you know? He's doing something that he might not even get to see or enjoy, but he's putting his life out there for people like us to enjoy many, many years later.
What teared me up was he said he always had a great purpose in life, and that was to sacrifice for his country. But how many people can actually do that?
Exactly.
And Xiong, you went to the museum with me. What did you take away from that experience?
I mean, it was a really nice experience of where you can see and live through the history of what AnJunggeun's life was like. There were even copies of recreations of the court where he was sentenced as well. I think there was a clip of us sitting with the video running, and you could really get immersed in the experience and realize and feel what it must have been like being sentenced in a foreign country as well, not in Korea. It was in China and Russia as well. So I mean, it was more than just a simple memorial museum. It was a living moment in Korea's history. AnJunggeun was actually one of the key figures that changed the course of Korea's history, leading to its freedom as well.
He paved the way for other independence fighters to come about.
Yes.
And also, it was really interesting to see, there were so many toddlers there too.
Oh, really?
And they could have immersive experiences with the exhibitions. The museum itself was really
You know
fun
what
to
was
go.
great? That the
that's so
toddlers
nice.
will come, it was a weekday as well,
Yeah.
but they'll come with their parents, and they had this like a sheet of paper, which they had to go around the museum and get some information and then fill in the blanks. So it was actually a really good learning experience, it seemed like, for the children as
Yeah,
well.
I even listened to what the parents would say to the
Me
children
too,
just for
actually,
more
yeah. I was like,
information,
oh.
because they were filling out the Quizlets, and I was like, this
Yeah.
is all really good information. So if you do have time, and because it's so near the Seoul Tower, a main attraction here in Seoul,
You get a great view of the Seoul Tower.
you can get a great view, take a good, really cute little
that
pictures,
tower,
and then go down to the museum and learn a bit of history. Now, Cheska, would you like to take us to one more location we can go in light of Gwangbokjeol?
Yes, and speaking of going with the family, I think this is probably, I mean, not to brag, but probably the perfect location for you to kind of get outside of Seoul and take your family and actually enjoy this Liberation Day. This place is called the Independence Hall of South Korea, located in Cheonan, which is a little bit outside of Seoul. But if you look at the picture of this towering edifice, so the two pillars represent the indomitable spirit of South Korea as well. And one of the amazing things about this particular location is that this Cheonan is the birthplace of some of the most prominent freedom fighters, including Yu Gwan-sun, and a lot of the fighters who actually were birthed and used this as an active ground to do their freedom activities. Now, on top of that, even the construction story behind this building is quite touching and memorable. So around 1982, there was some controversy and contentious issue about Japanese revision on its history book regarding what happened with Korea. Now, the public stood up, donated freely, even the Koreans living abroad, and they accumulated at that time about what would amount to about 50 million USD,
Wow.
which was so much more than what the government was able to put in. So they put the money together and they built this amazing construction. Now, there are 7 different galleries that sort of take you on this emotional but beautiful journey throughout to learn about the Korean history. And again, this place is just so beautiful, and there are so many places to see just outside of the Independence Hall as well. So if you take your family there, I think it's going to be a lovely, lovely time to spend.
Do you know when the Memorial Hall was opened? Because I read in an article that one of the National Liberation Day events was the opening of this particular site as
That's so
well.
symbolic.
Yeah.
It was, and the interesting thing is there was a fire, a big fire that kind of delayed it. So they purposely scheduled the opening day on the Liberation Day, as Shio mentioned. So even the fire itself, I think, shows that whatever comes our way, Koreans will, get over it, and then we'll make our way through it, kind of spirit.
And while we were preparing this episode, I don't know about you guys, but what I thought was, I've been living here on this world for like 26, 27 years, but for every Gwangbokjeol, I don't think I've ever visited these historic sites. And it made me realize that I should be doing that. What about you? Do you think that you should be doing that from now on?
You probably went on holidays instead, wouldn't you?
Exactly, but I'm guilty of that because even it's a national holiday and it gave me a freebie to go on vacation and stuff like that. But whilst I was going to all these different locations, I realized the importance of actually celebrating this day for the sake of the day.
For sure. I mean, it felt different to me. I think it was a good opportunity as well. I mean, personally, I would actually probably be spending, if it was a holiday, just taking a rest, taking a break. It's only a single day holiday as well, so nothing much would have been different. But with this experience of having gone to a few of the places as well, of the sort of more patriotic sites, remembrance sites as well, it sort of refreshed my mind in thinking about what the country has done for us, what the people have sacrificed as well.
Because if you see it for yourself with your eyes, you realize that this isn't something you just read in a history book. It actually happened a few years back in our time. What about you? Did you ever think about that while preparing for this episode?
Actually, so I didn't go with you guys, but I visited 서대문 a couple of times before, and every time I walk in, there's this, I would even call it eerie, but sort of chilling
Oh yeah,
sense
for sure.
of, even though I didn't live through it, you just feel that pain, the cruelty, and the struggle that they went through to protect something that we so freely enjoy and we forget most of the time because we have struggles of our own in our daily lives. So as you mentioned, Ian, I think days like this is a perfect excuse almost to take a day and to go get ourselves out there and to remind ourselves what we're enjoying right now that has been given to us.
For sure. And we also asked our viewers if they've been to any of these historical sites or whether they would like to go to these patriotic locations and if they would like to visit them in light of National Liberation Day here in Korea. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to say. Curious in Korea 91 said Gyeongju, where almost every Korean student has been as part of their educational tours, 서대문 in connection to Yugansun, and Jeonju Hanok Village. Been to the Blue House before but would like to go back and finally see more inside. Ogu Saren said, I was lucky to see the magnificent Jongmyo Shrine with a fascinating cultural texture, preserving the annual Jongmyo Chereak. Toby Yod said, I had been on a tour on Cheongwade through my work. I'm curious about how it changed since President Yoon moved his official residence to Yongsan. So as our viewers mentioned, there's so many different places people can go around on these national holidays, especially holidays where you have to remember history because you should never forget it. And that's the message we're trying to deliver today. Aside from visiting these historical locations or museums though, what could be the best way us millennials and Gen Z can spend National Liberation Day tomorrow, Xiao?
I mean, throughout Korea, ceremonies, parades, and cultural events are held to celebrate the August 15th National Liberation Day. As it is a public holiday, roaming around the city, partaking in some of these events will definitely be engaging, but every city in Korea will have its own celebrations organized as well. So making a good use of the holiday and visiting other cities will also be worth your time. The day serves as an opportunity for Koreans to reflect on their history and the progress made since liberation, whilst acknowledging the value of national sovereignty, a true celebration indeed.
That actually sounded like a public announcement
It
for the Liberation Day.
That's what I
really
went
great.
for.
So I'll give a little bit more emotional one since Hyung gave us such a public one. I don't know about you guys, but I feel truly blessed as Korean to be living in this era. I can't even describe it.
It is the best time to be Korean, internationally, wherever you go.
We had put ourselves on a map that is not only recognized, but our soft power has never been stronger than ever. So I almost feel it like tomorrow is sort of a day to make the commitment and promise, for just our generation, to make sure that we carry that torch that our predecessors secured for us through literally blood, sweat, and their tears. And I think if we do that, maybe we can make a better tomorrow for new generation.
New generation.
Exactly.
And if I may add on, I think one suggestion I have is why don't we have parties for this day? It's not a sad day. It's not a day.
It's a celebration.
It's a celebration.
For sure.
And I think in other parts of the world, in light of their Independence Day, they have fireworks going on, they have different festivities. But why doesn't our generation sort of, initiate that trend? We could gather with our friends, hold up our taegukgi, national flag, and then party
Go
about.
out.
I mean, we can do the memorial service, but afterwards we can have a full-blown out celebration, party for the family to come together,
and stuff.
Korean barbecue maybe.
Korean barbecues, because at the end of the day, we all want to remember history and we never want to take it for granted. And hopefully you guys can have a wonderful National Liberation Day tomorrow. Until then, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Kyung
My pleasure.
and Jessica Dainong.
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for watching. Have a wonderful National Liberation Day. We are News Generation.
대한민국만세.
That's a flag.
Come on.